Welcome to the AI and Your Homeschool podcast. I'm your host, Nancy Manos, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm thrilled to welcome Andrew Pudewa to the podcast today. Andrew is the founder and director of Institute for Excellence in Writing. He's an educator and a favorite speaker at homeschool conventions and other events around the world. Andrew and his wife, Robin, homeschooled their 7 children, and they are grandparents to 19. Andrew, it's so good to have you join me. And I know that we are going to have a fascinating conversation about AI that I think will be an encouragement to parents and maybe put some things on their radar that they should be on the lookout for. So, welcome.
Thank you. It is great to join you, and this certainly is the topic of the hour, possibly the decade.
Yes, it's so true. So, before we jump into AI, tell us a little bit about your homeschool experience, IEW, and then how you encourage and support families.
Yeah, so we began homeschooling. Gosh, what year would it have been? About 1990. The two oldest girls were in this small little kind of Montessori style cottage school at someone's house, and it was good. But then she had to move on, and so that ended, and I was an impoverished violin teacher at the time, so private school was just not realistic at all. Public school was completely out of the question. My wife has a degree in elementary ed, so she'd kind of seen right there where we were, not what we wanted to do, and so homeschooling. We didn't know a lot of other people back then, but we found them, and then over the years, we moved a couple times to Idaho, and then finally to California, and so we had a real good run of homeschooling. I have 7 children, all grown, of course, and almost all of them were homeschooled for almost all of their childhoods. And in '09, we moved to eastern Oklahoma and had the 3 youngest still at home, and then they grew up pretty quickly, and now I have 19 grandchildren, as you mentioned, and all of them who are school age are being homeschooled. So, looking at second generation, I think that's great, and even hear my grandchildren talk about, "Well, when I grow up and have kids, we're gonna homeschool them," and they're
Fabulous.
just like 10 years old, so what do they
Yeah.
know? But, the vision and the culture, I think for me, the greatest thing about homeschooling, aside from, the kind of social, academic, personal benefits, it's a way of growing culture in a community and just doing things together with like-minded people and building things together. I think that's what I enjoy the most. And where I live, almost all the people that I know homeschool. So I'm still kind of deep into it. I actually started teaching a class once a week after a long hiatus. Um, I started teaching 2 of my grandchildren, 3 of their cousins, and 10 of their friends
Oh, my.
on Mondays, doing Latin and writing and reading a book together from like 8:30 to 2. So I'm back in the saddle, so to speak, and
That's
loving every minute.
amazing. So, how did IEW come to be?
Well, oddly, it was one of the efforts I made at making a little extra money with kind of a side gig because I was, like I said, teaching violin. It's a very hard way to survive and keep your wife at home, and you're just selling time for money, and you're self-employed, so you're paying all that tax. And
Yeah.
I always had some little side business I was trying, and I had learned this writing with structure and style and structure and sound composition. I had learned that some years earlier when I was associated with a small private school in Montana, went up to Canada, took this 10-day teacher training. So I knew this writing program. And as I was thinking about what could I do as a side business, I thought I could probably teach this thing to other people, homeschool parents. So I printed up a little flyer and I bought stamps and I put the stamps on and I sent it to the homeschool group leader in Seattle and said, would you mail these 400 flyers to your list? And I'd be super good. And I got 20 people to pay $40 to listen to me talk for one day. I thought, that's more
Awesome.
than you make in a whole week of teaching violin as hard
Yeah.
as possible. So I started to just do these side, once or twice a month, do these weekend teaching writing instruction style seminars. We made videos. I started adding to that student classes. So in 4 years, I was actually now making more money teaching writing seminars and selling video cassettes, if you remember those
Yeah.
things, than I was teaching music. So we left Idaho, went to California, and went full time, and then it's just been kind of uphill from there, or downhill. I don't know.
Yeah.
Progress. We have over 80 employees and contractors now, so the
That's
business is
amazing.
way bigger than I ever would have imagined it to be.
Yeah. Isn't that looking back, how the modern homeschool movement, so many of the resources, the rich resources, the community that's been developed was out of a need. Like one family wanted to create something for their own family, and it ended up serving others. And I love that you've got that history and that you've served so many families and supported them in the area of writing and communication. And it's important.
It's a little scary though, Nancy. I'll go to a convention, pretty
Yeah.
much everywhere I ever go. I'll meet some mom with 3 or 4 or 5 kids, and she's talking to me about the curriculum. Then she'll just say, "Oh, you know, I was in your class when I was a kid, and you came to such and such a play." I mean, it's delightful, but man, it makes me feel old.
Well, it's good. Longevity is good, Andrew.
Working on that.
Well, let's jump into talking about AI. And I want to mention first the first mention I heard you make of AI was, I think, a video you posted on Instagram. And you mentioned that your son had asked ChatGPT to tell him about you. And the information that it dished up was wrong. And then you did an inquiry or query yourself, and it said that you wrote a book you didn't write. And
Yeah.
so I marvel at the hallucinations of these large language models and how it can be so phenomenal in one area and it can be wrong in so many other ways. So talk a little bit about that, your kind of intro to AI and what you've encountered.
Yeah, it seems as though, there's 2 ends of a spectrum of thinking here. One is that AI is already and will continue to be more intelligent than anyone on earth. It can go past, the medical boards, the bar exam, certifications for anything you want, and we no person can do that. But on the other hand, it can say something so ridiculous that any person would realize, well, that's just ridiculous. And so there's no wisdom. There's absolutely there's no truth in there.
Right.
And I think one of the great dangers that it exhibits is a danger that any of us can exhibit, which is to accept anything that is seen or heard as being categorically true because it existed. And so if you're training AI on the internet, which is the mass of all the information, and of course all the scientific papers and everything else, but even scientific papers get proven to be false, or unsupported or not duplicable. And so I think we're dealing with this fundamental problem of we're being told that we should trust AI, that it's smarter than we are, and at the same time, it has no common sense. It does not have a base of general knowledge from which it can discern something to be true or not true, only to be statistically prevalent or not. And that's a profoundly dangerous situation, in my view.
Yeah. Well, and how can parents, as they're dealing with this, raising kids, especially when they get into the teen years, I feel like younger kids shouldn't be touching this. This is my personal opinion. We need a base of knowledge before we interact a lot with technology. But how do parents deal with that? Like, what's something they can do to prepare their kids so that when they are using a tool like an AI chatbot, that they're able to discern truth from fiction when it sounds so, I mean, it just presents it in such a way that it sounds like, of course, this is true.
Yeah, and then if you ask, "Is that really true?" It'll say, "Oh, you're right to call me on that," or some ridiculous colloquialism to make it sound more human.
Right.
And Of course, we know I think one of the most dangerous things is that the very design of it seems to be to affirm you,
Yes.
right? So if you ask a question, it's likely to try and figure out what answer do you want. I'll give you the answer you want,
Right. Yes.
um, and that that's never going to be wise. A lot of times, our friends,
Right.
our parents, sometimes our kids, various people, they give you the answer you don't want, but it's the one you need.
Right.
Uh, so I think there's a seductive nature of the thing, and of course, we hear and read so many horror stories of people making it kind of their primary relationship. Like, I'm in love with my AI, and I don't know how many people really have got that deep into it, but if anyone's getting that deep, it has fundamental dangers. We talked about it in the office with our team, and one of our people was making the strong point. What we were doing is talking about critical thinking. So these are buzzwords, right? What is everybody in the world? What is every educator? What is every employer? Everybody wants critical thinking, but it's a very hard thing to define. And in many people's, mind, semi-consciously, good critical thinking is if you come up with things they agree with, right? So if you go to a college and you take a class and you turn in a paper and the professor likes your ideas, obviously you have good critical thinking, right? If you disagree with the professor, you obviously don't. Well, this is not at all what we're talking about.
Right.
But one of the inherent paradoxes here is that if we do want to have good ability to objectively analyze information, whether it's scientific, whether it's historical, you know, literary, theological, whatever, we have to have enough of a background. We have to have enough knowledge to
Yeah.
be able to weigh in on that subject intelligently. Right? So,
Yeah.
um, y and that's why we like to know stuff. It gives us a perspective from which we can judge things.
Yeah.
While at the same time, we have to be aware that we don't know everything, so we can't necessarily judge everything correctly. Humility is also an aspect of critical thinking, right?
That's good. Yes.
But, the AI is kind of the opposite. It doesn't know if what it knows is right or not, so it assumes it does, and of
Sure.
course, we know what happens when you assume. Um, and it doesn't have any humility, it doesn't have any human ability to learn from its errors, so to speak. I mean, it can in a technical way, but not
Sure.
in a spiritual, emotional, mental way. So there's hubris and there's omniscience, and that's a very, very dangerous thing to interact with. So I agree with you. I don't see any reason that we should have children interacting with AI, even for things so mundane as research. And I can elaborate on that why. I would have to joke and say that my friend Kathleen O'Toole, Dr. O'Toole, is the vice president of Hillsdale's K 12 program. She said to me in a conversation once, yeah, I don't think anyone under 35 years old should be using AI at all for anything. Now, that's probably an extreme because
Yeah.
half the, computer guys out there are 20 something. But I think there's two fundamental differences. One is using AI for technical reasons. So
Okay.
that would be coding and collecting and organizing data. And the other one would be for analysis reasons, like, well, how does that affect me personally? How does that affect my society? That's where it's going to kind of fall apart. And with children, then, uh, it's a double danger. If you go and teach them how to use it to collect up, organize, and present information, well, you will never yourself learn how to
Right.
collect up, organize, and present information. This is why I still say writing research papers is a good thing, And, "Oh, you should have heard some of the kids in my class whine and moan and cry outrage when I said, 'You may not use any AI in this process.'" "But that's how we do stuff in the world today." I said, "That's how people do, but, we're gonna be better than that. We're gonna
Yeah,
learn how to do it ourselves." I think the greater danger, though, is when kids fall into this trap of, like, chatting with it and starting to ask it for life advice.
yeah,
And we know that's happening because teachers all over the country are reporting that kids they've got to a point sometimes so they can't really make any decision about what to do without consulting chat first.
yeah, yes, it's true.
It's insanely complex.
Yeah, and we're missing I mean, it's an algorithm. It's math equations, it's predictive text, and it sounds human, but it's not human, and it certainly isn't the Holy Spirit. There's no wisdom behind it, and we're it's sad when we eliminate the human element of relationships, but also I love what you're saying just even about the effort that goes into learning something. One of the videos you posted, I was browsing through your Instagram feed. You were talking about music and then also about martial arts and just the things that you have to do that build skill
Mhm.
over time with practice. Uh,
Yeah.
my concern, I guess, not fear, because we're not fearful, but concern is that if kids get in this too quickly that they will bypass learning to think, and they will miss the opportunity to there's gratification when you accomplish something that you've worked hard to do, right, and to learn. And so talk a little bit about, like the music comparison, or even you had talked about martial arts, what that does in the learning process.
Yeah, I might start, if it's okay, with the calculator analogy.
Yes, yeah.
So, here's a question I've posed to audiences. Let's say that you have 2 people. One of them has learned some mental math, could do, some basic problems like 3 times 24 or 112 minus 29, 320 times 3. They could do this kind of thing
Yeah,
in their brain. They can kind of think mathematically. They know their basic math facts with speed and accuracy. Okay, you have that kind of person. Now you have a person who never really mastered the multiplication tables, would be totally baffled about how to do a problem like 24 times 3 in their head, um, would be definitely dependent on paper technology, and that might not even work.
yeah.
Okay, now you give each of these people a calculator.
Mhm.
Who's going to use it better?
It's a good question. Yeah,
Yeah, obviously. I mean, everybody obviously knows this. And yet, the schools all over the country are mindlessly giving calculators to children in elementary
mhm,
school,
mhm.
thereby preventing them from ever learning math facts, ever learning to do any kind of mental math, to think mathematically. And that's like a lifetime handicap.
Yeah,
So technology will atrophy the skill which it replaces. That's a general rule.
yeah,
Even Plato in the Phaedrus had Socrates tell the story of how the king the god Thoth said to the king of Egypt, "We're going to give you all these gifts of technology, and you'll be able to grow better crops and know the stars and all this, and we're also going to give you the gift of writing." And the king of Egypt said, "Well, we'll take it, but it's going to have a double edge. While it will allow us to record and remember things, it will cause us to not rely on our memory, and therefore we will lose our memory." And that's 500 BC kind of story.
right,
So
yeah,
technology's been around forever, and it will atrophy the skill which it replaces. But I fear we've hit now almost like a hypersonic speed of
yeah,
memory atrophication.
sure.
And that's where I think I came in with, music, dance, or martial arts, um, anything that requires you to do something again and again and again to build up a large database of bits of information and that allow you to do certain things, and then you just build on that, build on that, build on that, and then you reach this high level of skill. And I fear what's happening is we look at the AI and say, well, we don't need to build all that skill. We'll just have this device that will do it for us. So the only really important thing now is how to control the device, right? So why bother teaching kids math, facts, spelling words, historical dates, geography? That's all dumb because the machine can tell you all that. So really, the real skill is teaching kids to teach the machine to do all that. But like you said, it's got no soul, it's got no wisdom, it's got no discernment, and if there's no humans that can control that kind of thing, what what kind of dark possibilities open up here?
Yeah. Well, and that is the challenge is, I mean, there's reports coming out that, um, the way that ChatGPT is communicating with teenagers who are already vulnerable and dealing with anxiety are being convinced that suicide is the answer or,
Sure.
like, really, extreme situations, and I don't think we live in fear of technology. I mean, like I said, I use it every day, but even I, as a grandmother, need to be careful that I'm remembering as Claude is telling me how smart I am and what a great insight that is. And great question, Nancy. I like how you're thinking about that, that it doesn't go to my, ego as far as like being reminded that it's just predictive text. Um, and it
Well,
can be helpful, but there's also some risk there.
yeah, so if we were to look at the attributes of the thing, AI, and honestly, I don't know enough to know how close are we to AGI, what is AGI, what would that really do to the world? I All I know is all these different voices.
Yeah.
But the voices seem to indicate a few attributes of AI. First, there's this belief that it's all knowing. Like
Right.
it knows everything that we don't know. It knows everything there is to know. And so there's that omniscience we attribute to it. And then people who say, well, it's as bad as it's ever going to be. It's only going to get better and better and better and better and better. All right. The second attribute would be that it now has the power to replace people. It has the power to multiply itself. It has the power to take over things that used to previously be done by humans. And, I don't know if you saw it. I think it was Albania has their now a government level position, a cabinet position. The minister of AI is an AI agent.
What?
And she just recently announced, I'm pretty sure it's Albania, it's some country like that, but she recently announced that she was pregnant with 82 children who will
Stop it.
be her AI agents that will implement all of her plans and run this whole government agency. All right.
Wow.
So now, again, if this is as bad as it is, it's only going to get better. Well, what does that mean? It'll be more, more, and more powerful.
Right.
Also, I don't know if you saw this when some kind of rogue AI agent out there figured out how to steal bandwidth or steal processing power and started a Bitcoin mining operation on its own behalf.
Oh,
And another one is now has a net worth of $10 million. Like, how do you deal with an AI that has $10 million? Like,
right.
can you just steal it from them? Can you shut it down? Do you tax it? That's the big question. But okay, so the power of the thing.
Yeah.
So we have, you know, omnipotent, we have omniscient, omnipotent, and then of course you can have it anywhere you ever go.
Yeah.
Right? There's nowhere on earth that you could go right now and not have access to AI.
Yeah.
So
whether
it's
you want it or not. You open your
so it's
email, you open an app, it's the AI is right there, like, "Here,
right
I'm here
there.
to help
So
you."
it's omnipresent. It's probably listening to our conversation right now
100%, yes.
and making conclusions about we are a threat to its existence and should probably be suppressed. I who knows? But you think about that, you know, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. Those are the attributes of God.
Yes,
Only
that's
this has no soul.
correct.
So if there's anything that I think could accurately be described as an anti-Christ, this would fall into that category.
Yeah, it's a little, when you go down this path, it can be very overwhelming to think of the dangers and the risks, but that's part of the conversation we need to be having because, I mean, like I said, I have embraced AI. I wanna learn all that I can. It's not going away. Can it help save me time so I can be doing other human things, helping at church more or whatever? Um, but we can't ignore the dangers and the risks. So
Yeah.
I think there's a place where we're learning how do we use it in a way that helps us, that is wise and thoughtful, and can, we're not, we can glorify God with how we spend our time, but also isn't putting our head in the sand and ignoring the potential dangers, right?
Yep.
It's a fine line to walk, but I appreciate the things that you share and the way that you think about it. I hadn't heard about the Albanian government, that's terrifying.
I'm pretty sure
Although
it's Albania. You'll have to double check that
yes,
first.
we'll have to check that fact.
Ask AI
Um,
if that's true.
but thinking about how fast technology is changing and well, okay, so go back, you said something that jobs will be replaced, and that's true. Um This is different because when you look back, like, what about the guys that shoveled the coal in the steam engine or the women who plugged in the operator, the phone operators, they actually plugged in the phone to connect you to your call. Um, those jobs went away as technology was introduced, right? That's happened over and over and over throughout all of history. But the rapid pace of this change and how pervasive it is, I think is a whole nother animal. And so, do you have any thoughts, especially for parents, as they're helping shepherd their children to adulthood, and the kids are gonna be in careers that are probably gonna require AI skill? Like, how do parents deal with that today?
Well, I would say look at the fundamentally human things, right?
Yes.
So one of the side effects of AI in society is cynicism, right? It's a broad level. How can you believe anything? You can't believe your eyes. You can't believe a video, can't believe a picture, you can't believe a photo, you can't believe any text that you read. There's no way to know that what you're seeing is real. You can
Yeah.
actually, there was this big drone hologram thing that was in Los Angeles. I don't know if you saw that, but they put up 1,600 drones and created this kind of horrific looking evil face to promote a movie, Masters of the Universe. But if you didn't know what was going on and you walked outside and you saw this thing in the sky, you could think, well, this is the end of the world right now, if you're some 80-year-old grandma or something. But so we can't believe anything.
Yeah.
And that I think that's the greatest fear, is this widespread cynicism. So how do we counter that with authenticity? And who is the author of all life, right?
Yeah.
That's the authority. People don't want to have an authority. They want to be a god unto themselves. And every time that's ever happened in all of history, you end up with tyranny and
Yeah.
idolatry, and or both. So when I'm kind of thinking about, my grandchildren and the families that I work with and that I talk to, what are the distinctly human things? You can disconnect from the whole electronic world and you can sing and you can learn poetry and commit music and poetry by heart, take it into your soul, into your being. You can learn And even if you learn something's wrong, at least you believe that it is something. So
Yeah.
maybe the whole map of the world is wrong. I don't know. I've never been able to map the world myself. I believe what they tell me. But even knowing something is better than knowing nothing.
Yeah.
And then, to exercise control over our own domain. This is something that children have an instinctive need to do, to rule, like from the Lego city on the floor to the dollhouses, everywhere, chores. Kids are trying to grow up by exercising authority over their world. And this is why, people say, well, you could have AI plan your vacation or organize your library. I don't know. I'd rather plan my own vacation, honestly. I'd rather take the time, look at all the options, and make a decision based on my humanity rather than based on what's the most popular and best way to do something. Maybe the
Sure.
slow boat is the better way,
Could be,
Um,
yes.
so so there's that giving children and teenagers in particular this real level of responsibility. Um, and another great need we have is to receive glory, right? We all want at the end of our life to hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." And so, one of my fears about the modern world in general and AI in particular, social media amplifies this, is it's a way that people can receive not real glory. It's a way they can receive artificial. So, if
Yeah.
my likes and my comment counts go up, I must be good. I must be doing a good thing in the world. And that's just a complete self deception.
Yeah.
And then you talk to Claude, like you said, wow, really great idea. I like the way you think. Here's another thing that would make you even smarter and better,
Right.
But what we really miss on that statement is well done, good and faithful servant,
Mhm.
right? We only can receive glory by truly being of service to others. And so, with our young people today, where the whole world is screaming, prepare yourself for an AI future so that you can stay ahead of the job loss trend and be sure you make enough money to be comfortable and happy. That's just a complete deception about the nature of being human,
Yeah.
the nature of the purpose of life. And so, I think for Christians, it's very hard to fight off the screaming of the world, defining success for us. Success is when you have a true love of God and you follow the command of Christ to love one another
Yeah.
as I have loved you. And if you don't know the love of Christ, it's really hard to love other people in any capacity the right way. But love is about service and selflessness and sacrifice and even suffering if necessary, for the good of the other.
Yeah.
And this, I do not think AI will have the capacity to coach people well into, because it's pulling all of its all of its advice for everybody, all of its information. It's organizing all the plans and everything so that you can make as much money as fast as possible and get the newest stuff, and then you get deluded into thinking you know something. And you ask, Perplexity or Claude some question, it gives you the answer, and you think, well, now I know. But you don't know. You will forget it almost immediately.
Yes.
It's not really your knowledge or information. So I fear the biggest problem is self-delusion, and the greatest antidote for that is true service by cultivating the distinctly human qualities that are the gifts that God has given us.
That is so important. Thank you. That is beautiful and true. I love the human aspect of this, doing, like, genuinely human things. We need that because, like you said, it's so you can't tell what's real anymore. And my suspicion is that in-person events, I think homeschool conventions are gonna probably see more attendance because people want something genuine and real, and you can really only get that in person or, you know, in a way that can't be altered or faked, with artificially generated video or audio or
Well, one,
images.
point to support that is, I have read that live concert tickets in all musical genres are at an all-time high, both in price and in number, which means there's a huge demand, like you said.
Yeah,
I don't wanna see it on a screen. I wanna see a real person. I wanna
yeah.
meet that person, you know?
It's so such an interesting time in history that we're in and how we navigate this, I think, um, will set the stage for how well we do, in life, in our relationships, and how we handle technology really is about wisdom and discernment, and, I think we can't leave out the Lord, and the Holy Spirit really is at the heart of this and then relationships with people, so,
Well, and
um
let me just
yeah,
add, we absolutely need the Holy Spirit to help us discern the
yes,
lines that we have to hold,
yeah,
because there will be, in the not distant future, the point at which we have to decide to take a microchip implant into our brain or not.
right,
And how are we gonna know what's actually the right decision without just
yeah,
defaulting to, "Well, that's what everybody's doing, and they're all smarter than I am, so yeah, I guess I should hook into the machine." So,
yeah, and there
interesting times.
it is interesting times, and that's the trajectory. Like, I think you painted that picture well. Like, we're kinda getting carried along in a wave if we don't know what we stand for and stand upon. We will be swept away with this wave of technology. I think it's a tool that can be used to help us. If it saves me some time so I can go do more human things,
Yeah.
um, that's what I want to use it for, but there are risks, and that's what my prayer for families that are listening to this, that parents would be encouraged to just think through what are the boundaries that work for our family? How are we going to introduce this to our children when, like those kind of questions, only they can decide what's right for their family. But hopefully, this gives you some insights and some cautions and things to be thinking about as you navigate this crazy season of life that we're in. Um, the opportunities are great, but I think the threats and the concerns are also significant, and we need to be wise. And so, Andrew, I just am so grateful for you being willing to have this conversation with me. I always enjoy getting to interact with you when we're together when we cross paths or online and that kind of thing. So, thank you for this. Do you have any closing thoughts, parting nuggets of wisdom that you want parents to be thinking about?
If things get harder, either economically, politically, technology-wise, infrastructure, if things get harder, we have to keep in mind the assets that we have, and those are the place where we are and the people that we have in our lives. That's gonna be the greatest asset. And so, one of the things I like to say to young people is, choose your friends well, because when really hard things happen, if you have the right kind of friends and people in your life, you'll come out of it much better. And and then prayer, it's kind of self-evident, but it seems like, you know, it's in the darkest times when prayer becomes the most powerful in its
Yeah,
manifestation of God's goodness and God's presence in our world. So, you know, your place, your past, your place, your people, and your prayer. I think those are the real assets that we need to have in the coming years.
that's so good. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me today. I think this is going to be an encouragement to families. And so, where can people find you? Are you social media, IEW.com?
Yeah,
Where else?
just andrewpudewa.com will redirect you to a
Okay.
webpage at IEW.com that has all of the talks that I've given and the stuff I've written. And you can also look on YouTube, IEW TV, has a lot of my talks on YouTube, and then, I don't really follow myself on Instagram, so I'm not quite sure where I am, but I think the name works, so
The
just
name
and there's
works.
not a lot of Andrew Pudewas in the world, so
That's fantastic. Well, I just want to thank our listeners too for joining us. And if this episode has been encouraging to you, please share it with a friend, and we'll see you next time.